This here is Scout. Scout just moved here from New York a couple weeks ago. We're in Venice, and this is Scout's roadmap to success. So basically, I think the big problem that Scout has was her guardian really didn't have a lot of rules and structure for her. And I think as a result, Scout got it in her mind that she either needed to be the protector or be possessive of the human. And this created a little bit of anxiety. Scout's also used to whine and whimper whenever it wasn't getting attention from its guardian. And so that's just kind of creates a petulance if every time the dog whines and whinnies for attention, we give the dog attention. After a while, that's how the dog asks for it. So one of the first things we talked about was adding in rules. So some of the rules would be not being allowed on the furniture for a month minimum, or as long as these problems are still going on. The little trick that the guardian can use is just get some tin foil and lay it on the couch and use a safety pin to keep it from going there. The dog won't go back on there. We also use some treats to motivate the dog to use the dog bed. I would recommend we keep on using that sort of positive reinforcement. Come here, Scout. Let me see. We're also going to stop petting Scout for no reason. Instead, we're going to ask Scout to sit. Sit. So we're going to say the command word twice. We're going to give the dog the command to sit, and I use the hand motion like that in kind of an arc over their head to put her into a sit. And you saw that worked really well. Sit. Well, not right now because we're filming, of course. But as soon as she does, then we want to pet her under the chin, and we're going to say just the word sit. We're going to try to avoid saying good girl, good dog, or good Scout, and just say sit. Here is the word we changed for the come command because she was kind of ignoring come, but she worked really well on the here. So we're going to pet her with passive training. So every time she comes and sits down next to us, we're going to pet her and say sit. Every time she comes to us, we're going to pet her and say here. Every time that she lays down, we're going to pet her and say down. After a while, with this combined with petting with a purpose, she'll come and sit in front of us and say, look, I'm sitting, could I get a little attention? And of course, we will try to pet her under the chin whenever we can. But we're just going to say just the command word and try to do that within 3 seconds. Same thing with correcting her. We want to correct her preferably before she does the wrong thing or immediately afterwards. You have a window of 3 seconds to either correct or reward the dog for the dog to understand what it is you're correcting or rewarding them for. Let's see, what else? We're going to use the escalating consequences to disagree with unwanted actions and behaviors. The first one is we're going to hiss. One hiss, and we're going to match the intensity of our hiss to whatever the dog is doing. Second thing we do is we're going to stand up abruptly and turn to face the dog. Remember, your authority goes whichever direction your belly button is pointing. Keep pivoting until the dog is stationary. As soon as the dog is stationary, take 1 step backwards, left, right only. That's how we communicate that because the dog stopped moving and stopped challenging us, we back down a little bit as well. We can also sit down, but a lot of times when you sit, the dog will actually come back a third time. The third consequence is to march directly at the dog with intent. Don't stomp, but move very briskly towards the dog until it turns sideways. I'm getting killed by the sun, so I'm going to have to look like Johnny Cool. As soon as the dog turns sideways, we stop. And then we pivot, we go to the second consequence and keep pivoting until the dog is stationary, then we take a step backwards. The only time we don't stop when we're marching towards the dog is if the dog is inside a boundary. So right here, I don't know if we can see this, but if this is, I'm not allowed to be here as a dog and this is the line, if I cross over here and the human marches at me and I turn sideways here, the human would still march at me until I got across this line. As soon as I got across the line, then the human would stop. That's how we establish boundaries. So we can establish a boundary to the door, to the kitchen, around the front of the couch when humans are eating, because that's, for a dog to be within 7 feet of any humans eating is very disrespectful. I'd like to see the guardians get more dog toys. Now we have bully sticks, which are great, but these are ingestible and you shouldn't get more than 1 of these a day. I would like to see some hard, rigid nylobones. One of the things that I really like getting for every dog is in a water buffalo tusk. It looks like a horn. Make sure it's not hollow on the inside though, it should be solid. They'll have that for years. Deer antlers, elk antlers are also very good to have because they're just very durable, and dogs get bored, they like to chew things. An iFetch or a Go Dog Go machine wouldn't be a bad idea to have outside so that when the dog is by itself, it can kind of play fetch a little bit, some things to occupy its time. And there are other types of toys that you can get, like a Kong. You fill the Kong up. Black Kongs are stronger than red, by the way. And what I usually do is get one of the chicken liver pieces that I put in. I put that in the Kong first, then I fill the Kong up with peanut butter. There's a hole in the bottom side so the dog can still smell that chicken liver, and that motivates them to want to go through the peanut butter. Once your dog goes through the peanut butter pretty consistently, then you can start freezing them, and before you leave, pull that out and give the dog something to do while you're gone. Something else we want to do is start training the dog to use the dog bed on command. as I'm watching Scout kind of lean against his guardian. Now, something I forgot to mention earlier, dogs do show affection by leaning on, but it also can be an insecurity. And because she's been insecure, in this capacity, I think she's just kind of saying, hey, I'm leaning on you for, not necessarily for support. But if she's clingy and following you everywhere, that's a situation where we might want to train her to sit, or to stay or something like that. And that, something else I mentioned, whenever we correct the dog or disagree with the dog, always try to end it by putting the dog into a sit or a down, something it knows how to do, so we can end with positive reinforcement. I always like to use positive reinforcement. Let's see, for feeding, we want to make sure that we're feeding the dog after the human eats first. So even if the human is going to go out and eat a brunch or is not hungry, just grab a chip and eat it in 5 or more bites and then give the dog permission to eat. Now, once the dog goes and eats, does she eat everything right away, or does she leave some in her bowl?
She eats it all right away.
Okay, perfect. If she did happen to leave some in her bowl, as soon as she walks away from the bowl, I pick it up, dump it back in the bag, and put the empty bowl back down so she sees that there's emptiness in the bowl. Mm-hmm. That way, when there is food in the bowl, I'm much more motivated to want to go and eat it. Let me see, what else? Okay, so the escalating consequences. The first thing we do is we hiss one time. The second thing we do is we stand up abruptly, turn to face the dog, wait for the dog to be stationary, then take a step backwards. Third consequence is to march directly at the dog until the dog turns sideways or greater. Fourth consequence is we're going to put the dog on the leash, timeout, step on the leash. As soon as the dog sits down, we push the foot with the leash towards the dog to take the tension off the line. When the dog lays down, we take the leash off of the dog. Well, no, when the dog lays down, we take our foot off of the leash. We wait for the dog to walk around, dragging the leash around for a couple minutes. Dragging the leash is dangerous, but this is a small quarter, so dog shouldn't be in too much trouble. But just we can't supervise, take the dog off the leash. If the dog goes a couple minutes and it's fine, then we take the leash off. And we're going to use those consecutively. So make sure that you always start with your hiss. And you can combine them. If you drop some drugs on the floor and you worry the dog's going to get the pills, you might hiss, stand up, and rush at the dog all simultaneously as a stronger move. Now, she is a little bit of a sensitive dog, so we want to use as little intensity as necessary to disagree with her. Also, I'd like to see the guardian practicing the recall exercise using the new command word of here. Again, this would be best with at least 3 people. We'd like to start out inside in the living room, and once the dog comes consistently to those people, each person has about 5 to 7 treats. Then we're going to move maybe one person in the bedroom, one person in the front yard, one person in the back yard, or maybe we could do it back here, right here in the courtyard. If we can, Venice. If we can, we might even do it in the little front yard over there, which is closer to the street and the action. So we're going to make it progressively more challenging, but reward her for doing the proper behavior. Remember not to give her the treat, not to say the word until the treat touches her lips. Also remember, when we have a problem, we're going to break it down. If the dog doesn't behave how we want, instead of getting frustrated, we're going to recreate that situation under a controlled setting. And we're going to break down the situation or scenario into individual steps and practice each individual step by itself until the dog practices that one step, clicking the deadbolt at the door or whatever it is. When the dog stays in place, then I move to the next part of whatever the transition is. And eventually I can do all this individual pieces of the exercise independently and the dog behaves, then I can start doing them together. And I do them slow at first and a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And eventually it gets to the point where you can redo that whole exercise and the dog knows how to behave throughout each step of it because we've taken the time to teach them. Let me see, petting with a purpose and passive training I think are going to be the most challenging thing for the guardian to get in the habit of doing. So leave post-it around in areas that you're looking at to remind yourself for doing that. Also, make sure you go through the process of leashing up the dog a couple of times a day. I'd like to see the guardian leashing up the dog at least 4 times for each one time that we go for a walk. Remember, the dog needs to come to the guardian, not the other way around. If the dog doesn't come after we say it the first time, we put the leash back down, sit down, turn your TV on, grab your computer, read a screenplay, whatever it is, and then wait a minute before we give the dog another opportunity to comply. Unless the dog's all whining and jumping around, then we wait for the dog to relax, and we'll be relaxed for a minute, then we give it another command to come to us. I'd like the guardian to get in the habit of not moving around the dog instead of walking through so the dog learns to defer and get out of her way. And then again, if we're going to put the dog on a leash, we want to pet the dog or do anything, the dog's going to need to come to us rather than us going to the dog. No more chasing of the dog. All right, well, that's about all I can think of now. If there are other dog behavior problems, if you go to doggoneproblems.com and click the button at the top in the red bar that says dog training tips, on this side for me, on this side for you, there's going to be a search box. You type in door exercise, escalating consequences, counter conditioning, whatever the problem is. I'll have a bunch of case studies of that'll show videos of me walking through those various exercises. And if nothing comes of that, then the guardian could always reach out to me. Call or text me, because that's the fastest way to reach me, but I'm always available to my clients, whether it's 6 hours from now or 6 years from now. All right, that's I think that's about it for this roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it. We'll see you in Venice.